I'm going to go ahead and start here. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It's our November UPLEVEL webinar, and on behalf of the Nexus and UPLEVEL team, we are very excited today to share with you how world-class programs are gathering their data across engagements and how they're turning those actionable insights into beneficial reporting. So I'm very, very excited today and intrigued by what our thought leaders' best kept secrets are and how that data is used within their programs and beyond. So today is going to be a really informative roundtable discussion that I think everybody is going to benefit from. So before I begin, I would love to introduce to you our co-host and our panelists. So joining me today, we have Diane Lebinskis. Diane is from Visit Ops, which is now a Nexus company, and we couldn't be more thrilled to have her as part of our team. So Diane brings over 30 years of experience within the industry, from steel case briefing program to founding Visit Ops, which for those of you who don't know, it's an industry-leading scheduling system that's built on the Salesforce platform. So Diane, thank you so much for being here today. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about you, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, hi everybody. So again, Diane Lebinskis, previously, as Ali said, with Visit Ops, now a member of the wonderful Nexus team. I've been involved with ABPM and in the briefing industry for like over 20 years. I think actually more like 40 years now, honestly. I think I started when I was 8, or maybe that was 18. But yeah, so just been involved in the industry. I probably know a lot of you may already know me, but excited to bring this session or host this session. Analytics has always been a very critical part of everything that I've done in my past. So I was super excited to be asked to be part of this. So I'm looking forward to it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, and now I'd like to introduce to you guys our panelists. So first we have Atwell Williams, and he is the Area Vice President of Customer Engagement at BMC Software. So Atwell, thank you so much for being here today. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and letting us know a little bit about you and your company, we'd love to hear as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I have to confess, when Ali first pinged me and asked if I would participate, I was like, me? Really? Are you sure you have the right person? Yeah, so I'm super happy to be here because, as she mentioned, we do a fair amount with data. And for those of you that I haven't met, which is probably a lot of folks here, we have been participants in the ABPM program for a very long time. I've been at BMC for 20 years. Within our what we call customer engagement, there's 2 broad areas: the executive briefing program and then customer advocacy and references. So obviously today we're going to be focused on talking about our executive briefing program, and this is our executive briefing center. And so I've been, like I mentioned, engaged in briefings for 20 years, been running the program for the past 4 or so years. And so just excited to be able to share with you some of the things that we do well, and some of the things that we learned, because a lot of learning comes from things you didn't do so well. So we'll talk about that too.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. All right. And next we have Susan Saliver, and she is the Strategic Programs and Operations Senior Manager at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Susan, thank you for being here. Please introduce yourself and give us some information about you and your company.
Awesome. Thank you, Ali. So I'm with Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and I've been here for over 30 years. Like Diane, I started when I was 2, and and I've been in a number of roles within the company. I spent the majority of my career here in IT. So one of my roles in the past was also analytics, more on the supply chain side, and then later on in my career, I started becoming a discussion leader and a presenter in our ABCs, talking about how IT ran, how HPE ran IT within the company. And I formed a great relationship with our centers. And then a few years ago, I thought, gosh, what do I want to do next? And I thought, I want to work with the center team. And so I joined the group about 4.5 years ago. Absolutely love it because we're close to the customer, but we're running the operations, and it's one of the things that I really enjoy. So I'm thrilled to be here and to share what I've learned from what we've done right and what we've done wrong as well.
Perfect. Thank you. We appreciate you being here as well. Before we get started, I did want to just let everybody know that we do encourage everybody to participate and be part of this interactive roundtable discussion. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to input them at the chat feature at the bottom of the screen. It's a great opportunity for you guys to gain some insightful information from our industry savvy panelists here. So with that said, feel free to submit any questions. We'll try to answer all of them. And before I pass it over to Diane to get our audience interactive and participating in today's discussion, I'm going to go ahead and submit a poll question here at the bottom to see what everybody's answers are. So give me a moment here and I will pull it up. Hopefully everybody can see this. So our first question that we'd like to ask everybody is, do you have a clear understanding of the metrics that are used or that are most important to your stakeholders? So the first one is, yes, I have a clear understanding. 2, I know some of what is important to them. And 3, I need to work on getting a clearer understanding. So that's our first question. It looks like we are getting some participation here. I'm going to give you guys about like 20-30 seconds to finish filling it out here. So right now there's a tie between, yes, I have a clear understanding and I know some of what is important to them. Okay, I'm gonna end that and I'm gonna share the results. You guys should be able to see this. So about 43% is yes. Another 43%, I know some of what is important to them, and 14%, I need to work on getting a clearer understanding. So thank you guys for participating. We appreciate this feedback. All right, so now into the fun stuff. I'm going to go ahead and pass this on to Diane so she can start the webinar portion of the event.
All right, great. Thanks, Allie. So let's start basically Atwell, I'm calling you first.
Okay.
And let's talk about what are the most impactful practices you have for gathering your analytics and how you share out that data.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. So for me, I'm a huge Stephen Covey fan. So I always also like his admonition to begin with the end in mind always resonates with me. And so to me, the most impactful thing I could think about is exactly that. Begin with the end in mind. Think about what is the story you're trying to tell and who is your audience? Because there's all sorts of data that could be collected. And so what we sort of had to learn is that we need to really think about our audience. So for example, up until 18 months ago, we reported into the sales organization. And I know you probably know from your work with ABPM, it's a pretty good mix where some organizations, some programs report to sales, others report to marketing. So because we were so long reporting to sales, all of the metrics we gathered were around how are we helping sales. So we reported on revenue touch, win rates, deal size, et cetera, et cetera. When we moved into marketing, I have to confess, talk about a lesson learned here, I just continued with that same thought process and those same metrics. And from my manager and her manager, which is our CMO, I sort of got somewhat interesting, but I couldn't understand why they weren't really jazzed about what I thought were great revenue touch numbers. What I learned eventually, though, is that ultimately they just care about, and let me be careful. Yes, ultimately in a company, everybody should care about the revenue and growth of the company. But the person you're talking to at that point in time, they care about their world. So in the world of, if you're talking to the CMO, they're interested in things like demand contributed pipeline, marketing accelerated pipeline. So we had to learn how to speak that language and deliver analytics and data in those terms. So for us, I would say that's probably the most impactful thing that we had to learn was understand your target audience and make sure that the story you're telling will resonate with that target audience, because that's all data is, it's telling stories. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Atwell. Yeah, that's so true. Understanding what's important to your stakeholders and making sure you're communicating it in the way that they can absorb it, that's important to them, and how they absorb it, and frequency too. Sometimes, how often do they want to receive that? So that becomes really important. Great, thanks. Susan, same question.
Yes. So for us, I completely agree with Atwell that we need to know your audience and what's important to them. I completely agree with that. for us, we use Salesforce as our CRM tool. So that's what our sales teams are using. And it was really important for us to be able to talk their language. We kind of rotate between sales and marketing every couple of years. Right now we're sitting in marketing, but we were in sales a couple of years ago. We might be going back again eventually. But some of the things that we know that marketing wants to hear and see kind of some things that are different than sales, but we've kept some things the same, even though regardless of which organization we're in. We went from a homegrown system to starting to leverage kind of industry best practices systems like VisitOps, because it sits on top of Salesforce, and we're able to leverage the data that sales is using real time. We're able to actually look at, and this is an example of when we are planning a visit, we can drill down and look at, based on which account is in there that is coming into our center, which opportunities are open today that we want to influence in our agendas. So it's really important to us to be able to see the data that is available in the systems real time. And then after the fact, when the engagement is over, the visit is over, within the next several months, we want to see if there's been any pipeline that was generated as a result of it. And so there's another tool here in the system. Again, it's real time, leveraging what's in Salesforce that shows us what has already been added in the gray, and then what is, what has not been added to our visit as pipeline generated. And I completely agree with, something that Atwell said as well, that, we look at pipeline, but then we also look at revenue. So we have dashboards in the systems that, we'll see that we are make available to everyone so they can see exactly where we are today. We need our BPMs, our managers that in all of the customer visits to be able to know, hey, what information am I missing? What is it that's going on? And they can do everything from a planning of the visit to the pre, the during, and the post, everything within one tool. And that tool feeds the analytics that everybody can see on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis. We extract that data and send it out to some of the key stakeholders. But at any time, they can go in and take a look at the dashboards as well.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Yeah, I remember in my old days when I was a briefing manager, I had always wanted to know, are there other opportunities we can influence? At the same time, we're working on these ones the salespeople want to bring in. Maybe they're not aware of all of them, or maybe there are other things going on with that customer. We didn't always have that 360 view of the customers and what they were doing. So, to be able to bring up those opportunities and make them visible, one, to yourself, the briefing team, but then also even to salespeople ahead of time, saying, hey, did you know about these opportunities? And, can we add them? Can we influence them? So now the time that you're investing in hosting that customer, you're getting potentially the opportunity for a bigger bang for your buck there, and then being able to track those separately, along with a lot of people already do the post visit metrics and opportunities. What are the newly created opportunities that were generated from that briefing, but then now you're doing the upfront too. What can you see upfront before they actually come in? So getting kind of all three touch points, the pre, the during, and the post for opportunities is a great practice. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, and Diane, if I could just, so something you're saying, just if we could keep the conversation going for a second more here. Something that we're looking to do, we don't do yet, so it's interesting hearing you describe that, Susan. It's pretty cool, is being able to use that information up front to help prioritize briefings. Because many programs are in a situation where demand outstrips supply in terms of the request for briefings coming in, probably a lot of times greater than we can fulfill. And so it's nice to be able to look at that opportunity information and be maybe more proactive and go to the sales organization, sales leadership, and say, hey, according to your pipeline, these are the top 10 deals that you've got this quarter. Let's go ahead and arrange a briefing for those, and just really be a lot more proactive as opposed to just waiting for them to come to us. So I think that'd be really cool to be able to leverage that information to do that.
Yep,
Absolutely. It's really nice to have it integrated, because before we used to wait for the sales folks to tell us, we'd ask them, hey, what opportunities do you have? We didn't know. We didn't have that visibility. Now we can say, hey, I see these opportunities. Do you want the agenda to be based around these opportunities? Or, so we're more informed of what's going on in their world. And so we don't have to rely on them to give us all the information. We have that information at our fingertips.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Mhm.
Thanks. Okay, and Allie, you're keeping an eye on questions in case any come up. So feel free to jump in if you have any that are critical.
Will do.
For Susan, let's start with you on question number 2. Basically, so you talked about kind of the metrics and some of the things that you do with that the BPMs do specifically. So what about your overall process? So, what we already know you're using obviously VisitOps and Salesforce for your CRM, but other tools, and how do you actually use them, and how do you engage the BPMs to be part of that whole activity?
Yeah, the BPMs are key for us. We spend a lot of time making sure that they're trained, that they know how to use the tools that are available to them, because VisitOps is more of the back end, and we do feed data from VisitOps into the center. So we know the screens that are in the room, the agenda that's in the room here, and our BPMs need to know how everything kind of works together. So that's one thing. But more importantly, they need to know that the data that they're putting into VisitOps, initially the visit request will come from our salesperson, and it comes in, it gets assigned, we vet it, we assign it to somebody, and then that BPM needs to make sure that they're putting in the things that are important to us, the things that we want to know. We want to know, who's coming, who are the attendees, what are their titles, because that drives the personas that are coming to our engagements. We want to know what content, how do we share that content easily with the people that are attending our engagements, and everything, the source of all this data, the master data, is going to be in VisitOps, and that's going to feed anything else. So as a BPM, they need to know, hey, did I miss something? Did I, so they have their own dashboard of all the visits that they've managed, in the past, going forward, and they can see, oh, I see I have a visit without an agenda here. I need to make sure that I, don't forget to put that agenda in there, because we want to know what topics are hot. What are people talking about in our visits? So we do awards to reward the most requested discussion leader. We, so we need to know what's going on in each of the engagements. So if the agenda, the attendees, we know what we've talked about the opportunities, the pipeline, et cetera. The BPM needs to be, on top of all of their engagements, that the data and the integrity of that data is good. So we do a lot of training, and we make sure that we engage the BPMs, and we will follow up with them if we see something that doesn't look right, because we're sharing that data out across the entire company. Everybody wants to know what our customers are saying, because the voice of the customer is critical to everything else in our business units, in our transformation office. This data feeds the entire company, so we need to make sure that it's accurate.
Yeah, so true. And empowering the BPMs and talking to them about the role they play is such a critical step. Because sometimes they don't always get the whole picture. They're doing their heads down work, but they don't always see, and they're not part of sometimes those conversations with stakeholders and things like that. So the impact that they have is huge, and making them aware of it and putting together the training program you were talking about is awesome, I think. So Atwell, what about you?
Yeah, so for us, it's sort of a continuation of what I was saying earlier, where we pull together our metrics just really based on our target audience. So for example, we have a dashboard that we prepare on a monthly basis that goes up to our management. And so it captures, you can see, this is like where we finished at the first half of the year. So it'll talk about, and by the way, just so everybody understands, we have 2 types of briefings that we do, as the name implies here. multi-company where we'll have multiple companies coming in to talk to us, or the more traditional one-on-one conversation. So we do both of those. And so we've split that out because that's what people want to see. And this represents the things that folks are interested in understanding, sort of at what I'll call an operational level, where you're saying, okay, so how many briefings did we do? How many people were there? What are the session ratings? So to Susan, you were talking about sort of seeing what people are talking about, but we also want to see how are they doing? You know, sort of how are the discussion leaders? Is the content resonating with the customers? And then another metric that we track in the far right corner there, this notion of customer confidence change. And what we're trying to look at here is what impact do we think the briefing is having on their perception of BMC? And what we do is we ask at the beginning of the day, what's your confidence that BMC can help you achieve your business objectives? Then we ask them that same question at the end of the day. And obviously we hope that their confidence goes up. And so we use that as a means of saying, okay, how are we doing? What are things that we need to look at here in these briefings? And so we do this on a monthly basis. And we also maintain sort of ongoing dashboards. And one of the things that we'll talk about here in a little bit is, unfortunately, this is a fairly manual process right now. And so we try to be really, really judicious in what data we are capturing because it is so labor intensive right now to get this. So that's the process we go through right now.
Yeah, thanks, Ewell. You know, it was interesting seeing your slide with multi-company briefings that you do. And I've been talking to a lot of different customers about those, and that happens a lot these days. And more, I think. And being able to track, you know, if you have one briefing, but you're talking to multiple accounts or trying to influence, as Susan said earlier, multiple opportunities to be able to report on those and track those and collect that data and share that back with your stakeholders is critical, because otherwise you're missing an opportunity for some really good metrics.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great.
I see there's a question in there.
Yeah, we do have a question. It's kind of like a two-part question. It's how good is the quality of your information in Salesforce upfront? So how good is the quality of your info in Salesforce upfront? We often see a difference between the info in Salesforce and what the customer is really interested in. So the second part is, how do you adapt and how do you capture that in analytics?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So whenever we have an engagement planned, we always will set up a pre-meeting with the salesperson just to really validate everything that we see in Salesforce. So I think that's a fantastic question, because data integrity, again, it goes all back to data integrity, is really key. And we all know that not everybody, and no knock on the sales folks, but they're always in a hurry, they're on the go. And so Salesforce may not always have the latest and the greatest. And so we do some validation to make sure that we're planning this and it's going to meet the customer's expectations. So we do our homework, but we validate for sure.
Yeah, and if I can add, Susan, to sort of what you're saying is that I will fully admit we don't always get this, but we try to go one step further in that in our process, we meet with the account team, but then we also insist on meeting with the customer as well ahead of time. So prior to, the only exception to that is the multi-company briefings. We don't necessarily get a chance to meet with all of the customers in the multi-company briefing, but in the one-on-one, we tell the reps that is an absolute requirement that we have to meet with the customer to hear directly from them. Because to your point, the data, not only is the data in Salesforce not necessarily accurate, but quite frankly, the reps have their view of the world, which may or may not align with the customer's view of the world. And I'd say probably, yes, the majority of the time it is aligned, but probably good 30% of the time. We were doing a briefing just a couple of weeks ago where we had that call with the customer, completely different perspective than what the rep had told us. So we absolutely make sure that we validate with the customer directly what is it that they're interested in.
Yeah, and that, oh, go ahead.
We have another question, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
So the next one is, how do you track impact and or success for multi-customer briefings? And what are the requirements for multi-customer briefings? For example, healthcare customers, CTOs, and more.
Yeah, great point. So for us, the impact and success of multi-company briefings is very similar to a single company briefing. We look at revenue touch, so we look at what are we getting out of the sort of the deal closes. So this goes back to Susan's point about having an integration into Salesforce. We have a homegrown system that's built in Salesforce. So as a result, we can now go and pull that data to say, okay, these 15 companies attended this multi-company briefing. Let's look and see what happened to the opportunities. Oh, that's the other thing I should point out as well, is we require an open opportunity in order for a rep to request a briefing. So they request a briefing from the from the opportunity object in Salesforce. So as a result, we now automatically have what's the primary opportunity that they're pursuing. So then we just look at, did we win that? Did deal size grow? And then we also, and I think I heard you say this, Susan, when we were there the other day, is you then ask the reps afterwards what new opportunities came about as that. Because that's something right now we're just looking out 30 days, but I love what you were describing is actually going back to the rep and saying, okay, was this purely coincidental or did it happen as a result of the briefing? I thought that was brilliant. I love that.
Yeah, we do the same as you from a single customer and multi-customer engagements. We ask for the same data, which accounts, who are attendees, what are the opportunities. Same as you, when the request comes in, they have to have accounts, they have to have opportunities. So we know what, how to build the agenda and so forth. And you're absolutely right. We track it exactly the same way. When the engagement is in the past and we want to go for, we want to look to see if there is anything that generated after that for those multi-customer or single customer. The previous slide showed the pipeline generated. You just click on a button and it automatically sends an email message, and the salesperson that submitted the request initially receives that email, and the email says, thank you for joining us on November 10th. I noticed that we have these 5 new opportunities. Are any of these associated to as a result of the customer engagement on November 10th? And they just click a button and they automatically can get added to the visit. And then we track that. We will track that over time to see if eventually that opportunity gets won. So then it becomes revenue.
Exactly. And I just noticed I forgot to answer the second half of the question. What are the requirements for multi-company briefings? Is it all healthcare, all one industry, different personas? So for us, it's tied to we have 3 business units within BMC, basically 3 product lines. And so our multi-company briefings, for the most part, are sponsored by a particular product line. So today, let's just take service desk, for instance. That's a product line that we have. So this briefing coming up may be all about service desk. And so it gets published out in advance and people could sign up, much in the same way you sign up for this webinar. You can say, oh, they're having a briefing coming up about service desk. That's interesting to me. I could sign up for that. And so that's how that works. We will occasionally do some based on persona, not so much industry, but primarily persona and then product line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do it all. It really, sometimes it is going to be industry focused. Sometimes it's going to be a region focus. We see a lot of Latin America coming to headquarters, whether the headquarters used to be here in San Jose, where I'm located. Now it's in Houston, and they'll bring a whole contingency. It could be from a regional perspective, so they all speak the same language. It may be multiple industries, but it may be all CXOs, et cetera. So we see the gamut. We definitely see, in fact, today here we have from Italy, the government, and a lot of different offices from the government. So it's not necessarily multi-customer, but they each have their own, what they're interested in talking about here. So it's multifaceted Italian government.
Great. Okay. Hey, thanks. Great questions too. So the third one is, let's talk about the future. So as you're collecting and I see you're already doing something that are futuristic, right? Collecting before opportunities before and after briefing, but what else? Like, what's on your horizon? What do you see coming, maybe even in the industry in the future, or what are you doing in your own program? So, well, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, so we'd love to be a lot more predictive in what we're doing. And what I mean by that is, as we see look, I'll just give an example. Looking at the dashboard where we showed sort of that confidence change, we'd love to be able to see, okay, is that a leading indicator of what's going to happen with revenue down the road? Our challenge, however, with that type of analysis that we'd like to do is that so much of ours is done manually right now because of the fact that we have a homegrown system. So what we're very actively looking to do is to adopt a sort of an off-the-shelf tool that has a lot of this reporting built in to be able to allow us to maybe for certain things have to do some heavy lifting, but for what I call sort of blocking and tackling reporting, it's just out of the box and we can just run with it. And so I'm sure, Susan, you'll see that's what you get in visit ops right now. There's just a ton of out of the box reports. And that's something that's very attractive to us. And that's, I think, is our future, is getting to being able to do some of the cool things, the more innovative things, and not have to worry about what I'll call sort of the bread and butter reporting, which right now for us is very heavy lifting because it's all just writing from scratch reports in Salesforce, which is very, very time consuming. So that's what we'd love to see happen going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, for you, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, just I remember you saying, like you have one person, but being able to spread that out amongst other people, because then you start getting ideas from other people. Hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could measure this and that? So once you get the platform and the basics done, then you could just explore all different kinds of things to measure and how you use your analytics and how you share it within the company.
Yeah, and we're a very small team. Susan, we're like, we got one, one, 1.5 centers, but only 3 briefing consultants. That's just 3. And so if I have to take a half a person's time just to do reporting, that's just not reasonable, because that means, okay, we're not doing briefings because we're spending all of our time doing reporting. That's just not really a great use of resource for us. So that's why being able to get so much more of this automated and some type of an AI or machine learning into the reporting, just that we would love to see that.
Yeah, I can tell you out well that when we moved to visit ops and they had all the canned reporting already, I was able to repurpose 2 people to do other things. That was out of a team of 3, and 2 out of those 3 were able to repurpose and do other things in the organization that were, more value add, because all of these things were already available to us. They were canned, and they didn't need to be manually done, every month, every week, et cetera. It's so much more automated and easier. And so to the question about kind of what's the future, I completely agree with you on predictive analytics. That's something that we've started playing with a little bit. It is very manual. It is, we've been working with our marketing analytics folks to put in some logic based on customers that have come in the past, based on where we see their opportunities are, what stages they're in today. It would be great if the tool could tell us, hey, you should be bringing this customer in now to maximize on where they are in their buying cycle, or maybe what they're looking at out on the internet and looking at what they want to buy. This may be a good time to accelerate closing this deal. So if something kind of prompted our sales team, us, to have the customer come in, that would be great. Right now, like you said earlier, that we wait for the sales folks to just say, hey, I want to bring my customer in. But wouldn't it be great if we had a trigger that would say, hey, this customer is prime for a customer engagement, and it will really help accelerate, to focus on this, and, the other thing. Right now it's all manual, and we could use some help in that respect.
Yeah. Well, you're right. That stuff is coming. It's all out there. It's available on a lot of different platforms, and it's becoming important as it relates to briefings and sales activity. kind of it's like in Salesforce it's called the next best action. So, to be able to say to a salesperson, and based on your analytics, right? So your analytics is the fundamental piece that's going to drive this, right? What your history with opportunities and how you've influenced them, the customer confidence metric that you were talking about, all of that data is what is going to feed these predictions. And you're going to end up, very soon, an opportunity, and whatever CRM tool you use is going to have a something pop up and say, hey, salesperson, did you know that if you host a briefing right now or in the next whatever X time frame, that your odds of winning this deal and closing this deal go up by X%. And that's the predictions that are soon going to be in front of salespeople constantly. And so the only way to get that is to have your data. One, as you were saying earlier, the importance of the BPM, getting the data in at the visit level. But then to the requester's question, how do you make sure the opportunity information is accurate too? That's visibility. You have visit packages, and I think probably a lot of people have these visit packages or briefing packages that you share with stakeholders and discussion leaders and things. And when salespeople learn that's going to be in front of all those people, sometimes they're going, wait a minute, that information I gave you before wasn't quite right. Yeah. So can we make it a little more accurate? But that's coming. That's next. That is on the horizon. And people are already starting to do it. And what that does is gives the companies the ability to, make better decisions, down the road, driving that business, strengthening relationships with those customers. So, things like you were talking about with surveys, getting that information and capturing sentiment analysis. All of that is where we're headed. Mm-hmm. And so if you have the core fundamental analytics, is that what we're saying? You've got that, then you can start building on that to get to that, what is that futuristic level that's coming up and where it's going to hit us all head on. Mm-hmm. And it already is. So, yeah. So anything else you guys would like to add, or Allie, are there any questions that have popped up?
Oh, Allie, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, we do have another question. It's actually for Susan. How do you capture the voice of the customer's information? Do you have VPs capture it and enter it into Salesforce and or Visit Ops? Do you have a formal process to distribute the info across the organization?
Great question. Yes. So one of the first agenda items on every customer engagement is a voice of the customer piece. And this is where the customer or customers are going to talk about kind of what's top of mind for them. Why are they there? What pain points do they have? And we have our BPMs are required to capture that voice of the customer. And then after an engagement is over, the BPMs send out they write up and they write it in Visit Ops. We have a section in there that we write the voice of the customer section, and then and then a summary of how the engagement went. And this gets emailed out to only internally within HPE to the person who requested the visit, our kind of management team here internally, and then any of the discussion leaders that are HPE discussion leaders. So they will have a link within that email message. They have a link to all of the survey responses. What was the agenda? There's, the whole package is put in there. But voice of the customer is one of those mandatory things that we capture, that the BPMs are required to capture. So at the end of every month, we then take a look at all of those voice of the customer post-engagement summary. So we then do a recap, and this is manual. So we have somebody that goes in and reads all of just the voice of the customer pieces of it and writes a summary of, hey, this is what we were seeing around the world from a geo perspective, from a voice of the customer. And it is a manual process. And then we kind of do an extract of all of that, and we send it to all of the relevant organizations across the company that are interested in voice of the customer. So it's a download of an Excel file based on what we've already captured in Visit Ops. So I wouldn't say it's very formal. I think it is probably informal, but a lot of people are interested in it. I have a PDL of over 500 people in the company that we send the voice of the customer insights to on a monthly basis. In addition to then sending it to some of our other analytics teams that put it into the tools that they use.
Are there other questions, Allie, or?
Those are the only ones that I have, so not yet.
Okay,
Yeah, feel free
all
if
right.
anybody has any more questions?
Okay. Yeah, and I think, the other thing too that I find is the voice of the customer, when you get those surveys, back, when the customer actually completes them, which is a whole nother topic for everybody. But, when you get that back, being able to tie that to that contact or that individual at that account. And then when you're having that strategy call with the salesperson before the briefing, and you can review, has that person been in before or visited one of our centers before, and what did they say? And have that easily accessible at your fingertips to talk about what did they say last time, so we know what to expect this time. That becomes really critical.
Yeah. Diane, something you just said just really, really clicked with me and resonated with me when you were saying about the surveys and are you able to get the data back on the survey? Something that we had to really think about that the pandemic really sort of changed is making sure that your data was actually materially relevant. And what I mean by that is because of the way we do our surveys, prior to the pandemic, we had pretty much a 98% response rate, because basically we asked them to do the surveys right then and there. We jokingly say, give us your survey, we'll give you back your luggage. So pretty much, like I said, we pretty much have about a 98% return rate pre-pandemic. When we shifted to virtual, though, during the pandemic, plummeted down to about maybe 25, 30%. So we had to really sort of start asking, okay, is the data that we're getting back, how statistically relevant is it? If we're only getting back 3 surveys out of a group of 30 people, even worse, 10%, do we get nervous about that? If somebody says, hey, this briefing wasn't great, because generally what we find is that the people that in that situation that fill out a survey are the ones that maybe have an extra hand or are unhappy about something. So I think that was a really important learning for us, is until we get back to having a statistically relevant sample of data, you got to be real careful in looking at what you're getting back in that data that you do get.
Very good point.
Yeah.
And we went through the same thing, although I have to applaud you on the 98%. I don't think we've ever done that, but
Hold your luggage hostage, it works.
I've taken note of that. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. That it's still, now that we're all going back in person again, that's something that we're striving to. We're a high-tech company. We get the best returns on our surveys on paper, which is crazy. When we were doing the pandemic and doing everything virtual, at 25% is about the same as us, if that. But how do you do high tech when you're in person and without leaving? And that's kind of our next challenge from a survey perspective, making sure that we want to be sustainable, we want to be green, and don't want to print. And so how do we? That's kind of like for another webinar, but that's kind of our one of our next tackles that we need to look at.
Well, I mean, Susan, if we're talking about sort of where things are going, and we use iPads. We've been using that for a while now, where we have an electronic survey, and like you said, we don't use paper. And at the beginning of the day, we say, okay, everybody, we've got some gifts for you. The iPads are not them. Pick it up. And we're going to use the iPads, though, to collect your survey data. And so we open it up right then and there. We start and we leave the survey open the entire day. We ask them that first question, as I said, throughout the day, go ahead and tell us how these sessions are working for you. If they're not working, tell us that. And then at the end of the day, if I'm facilitating, I'll say, okay, now, hopefully you had a great time. I wasn't joking. I need your surveys. And so right now, we put in 5 minutes in the agenda to complete surveys. And so everybody right now, go ahead and finish your surveys right now.
That's
You're
fantastic.
not working on your survey. Go ahead and do it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, then when they're done, and we even, because it's electronic, we don't have to wait. We'll see in the back, okay, yep, everybody's completed it. No, okay, we still got one that hasn't done it. Who hasn't done it? Come on, you're holding everybody else up. Let's go. And we make it fun.
I love it.
And we get their data that way.
Yeah.
I might be following up with you later about that.
Well, yeah, please do, because I want to reach out to you too. You were mentioning about the voice of the customer, and that's something we've really struggled with, is how to capture that information. You mentioned having your BPMs, in the session. Do you have your BPMs and an additional facilitator, or are they one and the same?
One and the same.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And what we encourage them is to actually have their laptop, because they're taking notes throughout the day. They're facilitating, they're taking notes. And then, we've gone this past year on a journey of really defining the role of, we don't actually call them BPMs anymore. We've changed it now to customer engagement advisors. But there are different levels. And so if you're kind of in the entry level, what are the expectations of that? Once you get to like the master level, you're going to be facilitating. You can be telling the HPE strategy story. You can be doing some whiteboarding, etc. When it gets to that point, you're going to probably need somebody to help you taking the notes. But for the most part, I'd say most of us, they're taking the notes, they're writing everything down. They open up the visit in VisitOps and they put the information in the boxes right real time. They click a button and it automatically sends the email message out. And that helps save them some time, because it used to be all very, very manual, and you take your notes and write everything down, or use your laptop, whatever. But I think, in order to save them time, we ask them just open up the visit and put it right in the box, and that you don't have to worry about it later on.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
And Susan, what about like action items too? Are they then sharing those with, it could be a discussion leader, it could be the salesperson, something like that. So they're capturing those too?
Yep, that all goes within VisitOps. And when they send out the post-engagement summary, when they send that, click on that button to send it out, everybody sees the the summary, the voice of the customer, the action items, and then there's the link to look at everything in further detail within the system as well. And that's open for anybody that has a Salesforce login. If they don't, I think that they need to request it, but everybody usually can see it within the company. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it's been a huge time saver for us. As I mentioned earlier, we're able to repurpose some of our folks that were doing a lot of this manual back end stuff to more value added activities.
Great. Great.
We do have one last question for the both of you. If you had to pick one KPI, which one would you pick?
Atwell, you want to go first?
Sure, I can handle that one. That one's an easy one. It's revenue. At the end of the day, I tell my reps all the time, look, I got a 9-year-old daughter. Okay, yes, I'm 62 with a 9-year-old. Let's just keep going. So I've got a 9-year-old daughter. She loves yogurt. She loves chicken nuggets from Chick-fil-A. I can only feed her to the extent that we sell software. So we don't do briefings just for the sake of doing excellent briefings. We do briefings to help BMC sell software. So that's the KPI that I'm being measured against.
I completely agree with you. That's why we're all here. You love the people that you're working with. You want to come in every day, but at the end of the day, the company needs to be making money, and we help the company make money by talking to our customers, by showing them the value add that the company can bring to them. And so without pipeline, without the revenue and that information about what we're contributing to the bottom line, we're not going to be around. So
Exactly. Yeah.
It has to be the pipeline and revenue.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, thank you both for all of that. A lot of great information. Allie, I'm just going to kick it back to you for any closing comments you have.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys for answering all those Q&As, and thank you everybody who submitted the questions. We do have one last question for the audience, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and display one on here and get your guys's answers here. So let's see. What would you like to do with your analytics? Or what would you like to do next with your analytics? Increase reporting, build a strategy, sit down with your stakeholders. learn more about the data, artificial intelligence, all the above. And if there is any other answer, please feel free to put it in the chat box or in the Q&A. We'd love to hear. So far we have all of the above. Build a strategy around sharing analytics. Give you guys a few more seconds here. Okay. I'm gonna end the poll now. So based on what would you like to do next with your analytics? 20% would increase reporting automation, 40% build a strategy around sharing analytics with others in the company, and 40% all of the above. So thank you guys for sharing that. And you guys can see this now.
Well, we know Atwell said reporting automation.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't vote, but if I could have, that would have been it.
Well, that wraps up our webinar. I just want to say thank you, obviously, Diane, for being our co-host. Your expertise obviously very much shows, so we couldn't have asked for a better co-host and obviously colleague of ours. So thank you so much for being here. And to Atwell and Susan, thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. I'm sure I know that you guys have meetings today and you guys were super responsive. So thank you so much for taking the time and obviously for your extensive knowledge and helping educate our viewers here. So thank you guys for being part of this. And to all of our attendees, hope you guys gained some insight. And I did want to let you guys know that we will be having one last webinar for 2022. It will be on December 8th, and the topic will be best tools, tech, and techniques for creating top experiences. So that we hope that all of you guys will be able to join us. It will be next month. So again, thank you for joining, and we hope to see you guys next month.